Let's see. It says we're going live. We're live. Are we live?
We're live.
I think we're live. Hey, everybody.
Hello. I'm Jenny.
I'm Paul.
And we're with the Go Box Art Crate.
We are indeed. And we are sitting here in the middle of June. It is
55 degrees.
55 degrees and raining.
So this is in Oregon. We're in a little city called Sherwood, which is about a half hour south of Portland, Oregon. And we've just had we call it January.
It is January. You can go home. I am ready for some warmer weather.
A little sun would be nice.
Yeah.
So hey, Kim. Hi, Joanna. I love that you guys are both here.
Yeah,
That's awesome. We're
awesome.
Two, super supportive, wonderful people.
You're the ones that keep us coming back.
Yes.
It's funny because I say that, but it is very important and it's very nice, and we really appreciate it because I know the first almost year we were doing Go Box and doing our live streams, there were oftentimes we had nobody.
Yeah.
We would sit here and do our live stream and nobody would be on, and then
it's nice to have no people are going to be here.
I think it's about a year ago. I think my friend Daniel started coming on, and that was at least nice to have somebody to engage with. And so then we're starting to grow our group, and that's awesome. We love it. What were you starting to say? I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Where is your painting nearby?
It is.
Okay.
So we're gonna do Summer Pines, and I like. Ooh, that's really glary.
Yeah, it is.
It's really.
Once you get it under, it's because of the light, natural light
There
coming
we
in
go.
the
That's
window.
better. Oh man. Do.
Typical Paul painting, very Bob Rossy.
Yeah.
And you can change things up. I'm looking at it, trying to figure out what I would change up on this one, but I think it's actually really nice, so I might not change much of anything.
Yeah. So this part down in here is probably going to be the most challenging part of this painting.
So give us the lowdown. How hard is it? Scale of 1 to 10.
Overall, or just that part?
Okay.
Wait.
Overall.
Overall.
Yeah.
I'll give this one. I gotta think about this.
Okay. Well, let's do a toast.
I think I'll give this one about an 8.
Okay. Ooh, difficult one.
Yeah.
We'll see. All
right, let's toast.
Cheers. Friday night.
Woo. Woohoo.
And let's zoom in and talk about our colors.
Let's talk about our colors. Okay. Excuse me. So our colors tonight are pretty simple, and actually this is something that I really encourage if you're a beginning painter and you obviously haven't done a lot of work painting. Mm-hmm. It's really easy. Like if you go into the art supply store, and it's easy to go in there and buy a whole lot of colors. I gotta buy green, I gotta buy purple, I gotta buy orange, I gotta buy all this. I think it's really important to kind of work. This is actually an excellent palette, phthalo red, something if you're really wanting to just do a simple minimalist palette. Magenta, yellow, and a cyan color is perfect. But it's kind of the new primary color scheme.
Yeah, if you've done any printing
process colors,
yeah. CMYK, that's the new color palette.
Yep.
I wonder what the old masters would think of that.
I don't know, because
some of them might be okay with it.
The old concept of primary, and actually we'll get into that a little bit with this painting tonight, is the old concept of red as being a primary color has kind of been debunked. And the reason is they found that magenta, now phthalo red's not exactly magenta, but it's close.
It's close.
Magenta and yellow mixed together actually make red.
Interesting.
So
that would not make red. That would make that makes this color.
Yeah, but it kind of gets up into here too. So that was the main difference between the traditional red, yellow, blue versus magenta, cyan, and yellow. So anyway, all that technical stuff out of the way. Let's get started on this painting. We're going to start now. One of the things I'm gonna.
Did you say the color names of what we got?
What do we got? Cobalt blue.
Cobalt blue.
Craft yellow. Phthalo red. Black and white. And this beginning part, we're going to start by doing some blends. And you'll notice this is something I do a lot in almost all of our paintings. And those of you who have been doing this with us have probably picked up on this. I like to add a lot of texture to the sky where the colors overlap. So bringing some of the phthalo down into here, bringing some of the more orange color down into here. And what that does is it's really hard to blend acrylic paints to get them like a perfect gradient like you would see with oil colors or Photoshop. And by adding this texture, what it does is it breaks up the choppiness. You know, 'cause sometimes it feels like we've got little bands of color and stuff like that. And so by just putting this extra little bit of texture, it makes it feel like, okay, there's clouds, but it also helps that transition feel a little bit more comfortable to the eye. So with all that said, enough of that.
Enough of that.
So this painting's kind of an interesting one. If you guys want to use your coaster as a template, as kind of like a measuring device, you can. Nothing wrong with that, but I'm just gonna kind of free form it tonight. What we're gonna start off doing is, one of the things I really wanted to do with this painting is really get our blend above the horizon and below the horizon to kind of feel like they belong with each other.
Okay.
So we're gonna start with a little bit of our craft yellow and just a tiny touch of our phthalo red. Basically what we want is almost, I don't want to call it mustardy color, but something just a little warmer than just...
I would call it goldenrod.
We'll call it maize, yeah.
Maize. And
basically what we're going to do is we're going to start off, and we're going to have to move fast while we do this because we want to blend into wet paint. So I'm going to start, let's go about 3 inches above the bottom of the canvas. I'm going to move quick. Just do a band of color.
So Kim's husband Mark says we need to do a TIE fighter sinking.
Okay.
Because of all the rain.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
now,
you've got the perfect opportunity with this painting.
I'm going to do another band of color about 1.5 inches to 2 inches above it.
Oops, I went low. Okay.
Doesn't matter either way. This is all kind of relative at this point. And then while these two colors are wet, I'm not going to rinse my brush, but I'm just going to take some white paint now. And I'm just going to brush in between and into those colors. And this is why we have to move fast on this part, because this is the one area where we're not going to get quite as much texture as we do in the other areas, because we want this to feel like this is our bright glow in the sky.
Congratulations, Joanna, on the last day of school.
Woo-hoo. Good
Lord, I am so happy. Our daughter's 16 and we did online school. We've done online school for the past 2.5 years. She has a lot of social anxiety, but especially with COVID, was super anxious, and this was the last of it. And she's going back to in-person school next year, and she's feeling ready finally, and I'm so excited.
For her junior year.
Junior year. I'm so excited that she's ready, because I just sort of waited around for her to be to that point without me pushing. I know a lot of times the anxiety is just, you're a freshman and it's all scary, and then we've got this pandemic, and so
real quick, I'll let you finish that in just a second.
No, it's okay. That was my thought.
I'm just taking some more of that kind of warmer color.
Maize.
Yeah. And just working above a little bit and pulling that down into my wet color. You can always exaggerate how far away from that horizon you go with these colors, meaning you can go further up or down from it than you feel like you need to. And I'm going to mix up a little bit more. And I like to mix kind of constantly as I go. And I'm going to...
Oh, we're putting more
Yep.
phthalo red in it?
So, not intentionally, but yeah.
Wait, I just saw you mix it. What do you mean not intentionally?
Well, I was just trying to mix more of the warm color, and I just ended up with a little bit more phthalo red. But that's the thing, is that's why I like to start a little bit away from where I quit, and then work my way down into the existing wet paint.
Joanna, my son finished in online school for the same reasons. Yes, it's hard. There's so much going on. And
now I've got a nasty canvas. I've got like wood showing through on this corner.
Oh, I gave you that one.
I know you did. All right, so I'm just going to add...
You get the scratch and dent.
A little bit more phthalo red to this. And I always like to kind of start a little bit away from our transition and work down into the transition. That's just me. Other artists might like to just start right at the transition, but I feel like that gives us a little bit of a buffer to allow it to blend.
I'm going to take this off. My sleeve keeps dragging in the paint.
And so, because I want my transition to kind of be along here, if I were to start my paint there, then my transition pulls down further. So I like to start with my other color a little further away, bring it down in to the edge. And that is how we get a more efficient, easier blend.
This looks like a tequila sunrise.
Looks like my my Smirnoff mash.
Oh yeah, oh my gosh, it totally matches your drink can you've got there. That's funny.
So we've had people ask on the group page about canvas showing.
Yeah.
And so one of the things reason that happens is just simply the paint's not thick enough. That's the easiest answer. But part of the reason that happens is when we're trying to do these blends, it's hard to blend with thick paint because it just kind of gets messy. I call it like trying to swim in ski gear. It's just not as easy to do. So just make sure that when you're doing this, there's a couple of things that come into play. Paintbrushes do two things. They add paint and they also lift paint. So if you keep brushing back and forth, what'll happen is it tries to find this balance. And if it's drier than your canvas, the paint on your canvas, it'll start to pick the paint up from the canvas. So it's just kind of something you have to figure out. I say it's the difference is you want it to feel like it's flowing smoothly without dragging, but not like it's a slip and slide.
Yeah, now Paul and I found a YouTube channel which we really like, and it is, do you remember what it was called? They go into the study of original masterpieces. Like there was, we watched one on the Great Wave.
I can't remember who.
I'll have to look it up. And then we watched one on Starry Night because they said it's on the Great Wave.
Wait, hold on real quick.
Okay.
Next step, we're just going to go straight phthalo red.
Up at the top?
Yeah.
So the Great Wave off Kanagawa is a woodblock print. That was your sticker this month. And one of our favorite paintings. But so we watched the art show on that because it was like, oh, that's our sticker this month. Let's watch it. And we had also seen some of Hokusai's work at the Portland Art Museum years ago. But in the end, they were talking about how Van Gogh's Starry Night was actually, they think, was inspired by some of the wave pattern in that painting.
Yeah, well, the big curl.
But what I'm getting back to on that is they did a bunch of really up-close, high-definition zoom-ins of Van Gogh's Starry Night. You could see white canvas
a lot
everywhere. Like, I was surprised because I know he's known for super thick painting. Like, some of his paintings were, I have read some of his paintings are half an inch thick from the flat side of the canvas. Like, literally, like, they were almost like relief carvings. And so to see all that white canvas, it was like, oh man, you know, it's not necessarily always a really bad thing.
No.
To have that.
Well, and then also there was one about Claude Monet. Monet is the way they pronounced it on there. And
well, and they pronounce Van Gogh Van Gogh because that's technically the Dutch pronunciation.
Yeah. But Monet,
so we're Gothbox. Did you know that we're Gothbox?
Gothbox. Monet, as we know him here, his big installation of water lilies that was commissioned basically by the government of France has corners that he didn't even finish. So I mean, like, we get all worried about perfecting things, and here's great masters leaving things 95% done.
Like, it's good enough.
Good enough. I got my point across.
I'll have to look up and see what show that was.
Yeah.
Because it was really neat. And lots of information. And they're short episodes.
Yeah, and our daughter calls them boring.
Yeah, of course.
But I find them absolutely fascinating.
As soon as she goes upstairs, we're like, let's put that on.
Yeah.
Let's put that art show on.
So what we can do now is I talked about kind of doing our little bit of transition. So I'm going to take a little bit of our phthalo red now. And just very lightly. And you can see it's starting to kind of lift some of the paint when I do this. And that's okay because it almost starts to feel like there's highlights. But I'm just adding some of this color. Nothing real specific, just some soft, smudgy little streaks.
So real quick, that art channel, and I'll even type it on here, is called Great Art Explained. Yeah,
it's really good. I like it a lot.
And they're 15-minute tutorial or informational thingies.
Yeah. There was one about Salvador Dali we were watching.
Yeah. Oops, I'm not used to this keyboard.
I thought the thing that was interesting about Dali was they were talking about how he would put himself into the beginning stage of REM and then wake himself up. Did you catch that part? Where he would lay on his stomach with his hand hanging off the edge with a bunch of keys in it.
Who is this?
Dali.
Oh, yeah. I actually didn't pay attention to that one.
So he would lay on his stomach with his hand hanging off the edge of the couch or whatever with a handful of keys with a big ceramic bowl under his hand. And so as soon as he would fall asleep, he would hit REM and then his hand would release and open the keys and it would wake him up.
That's funny.
Psychologically, what they were saying, now I just mixed up a little bit more of our kind of softer color with the craft yellow and phthalo red. But there's actually something that happens to our brain when we wake up on the verge of sleep.
Yeah.
Where you're actually wakefully dreaming. And he figured out how to do that intentionally.
Is that called lucid dreaming?
It's lucid wakedness is what they called it. I don't know. Wakefulness. I don't know. But it's a legit thing, and Dali figured out how to do it on his own. And
wow. And then you went off to paint melting clocks.
Yeah, because he was painting. He was dreaming while he was awake, essentially. You can do some of this also down below. It's not as important. We kind of have a lot of other things that go on down below, so it's not as vital.
So tell us where this is. It looks very northwest.
It's really just totally a figment of my imagination. I don't have a specific place in mind. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's not as good. I think a lot of times people put way too much emphasis on being able to paint out of your mind. Out of your head. Mm-hmm. It's probably good to paint out of your mind. But as far as I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I can't paint anything creative out of my head. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that, if we're talking about even Van Gogh and Monet, they didn't paint out of make things up in their head. They went out and they painted what they saw. Now they maybe interpreted it different, but they were still using something real that they could look at.
Sometimes Van Gogh painted out of his head.
Did he?
Well, it's kind of partially because he did Starry Night during the day from his memory of what it looked like at night.
Right, but he's still using a reference.
Yeah.
A visual reference. He's not sitting there and saying, I'm going to create Middle Earth out of my head.
Let's save that for Tolkien.
Yeah. And so, but if you go back and you look at most of the great masters of painting, very few of them, outside of Dali, painted things that were, I made up a landscape. No, not very many.
It's hard to do.
It's hard to do. You have to understand a lot about nature.
And you have to look at a lot of reference pics.
You have to look at a lot of reference pics. You have to look at, if you want to paint oceans, you need to look at a lot of oceans. You need to understand how oceans look and how waves crash. If you want to paint clouds, like we've talked about clouds. It's just something you got to practice. And a lot of it is just training yourself to see it. All right, so next step. We are going to mix up a little tiny bit of our cobalt with some phthalo red. Mix a nice violet color. You can lean a little bit towards the pink side of phthalo red. And we're just going to put a little bit of this up at the top. And I don't want a lot of paint on my brush because I don't want this to dominate too much. In fact, you can be really choppy with this. What this does is it helps keep the eye from wandering off the top of the canvas.
It's like, stay here.
Yeah, stay right here.
So mine's a little wet. I'm going to wait because it's kind of lifting my paint off.
Yeah, mine is too. And I'm okay with that for me.
I've done this before where you kind of darken each corner, and that also, even the lower corner, it kind of pulls your eye to the middle of the canvas too.
Yeah, and the nice thing about doing this little bit of violet like this is if you get it on there and you're like, oh, that's just really too intense, you can always kind of dust over it with some phthalo red. Now, I've got this area, you were talking about paint lifting. I've got it happening right here. So this is something that our instinct, our brain tells us, add more paint, because it's not covering. And what happens is it actually just keeps lifting the paint. So the best thing to do, especially in this case, just leave it alone. Don't touch it anymore. Let it have its little moment. Relax a little bit. Put it in timeout. And come back to it. You know, that's the main thing. And I just did just a tiny little bit on this one compared to the original, and it's fine. Like, it doesn't need much. It don't need much.
I knew you were going to do that.
Cocoa butter.
You and Aaron Neville.
Yeah. And you don't even need to, because of this proportion and scale, you don't have to do any of this down in the bottom. What? A drip? What'd you do?
Revealed your son.
It's Venus.
Hey, I think you should leave that. That's a happy little accident right there.
Yeah. So what that was is a water drip, I am assuming. And Jenny decided she needed to wipe that away. Am I holding it loosely and swinging, flicking?
Hi, Debbie. He usually does. He drops his brush a lot.
I do not drop my brush while I'm painting.
You actually, everything, yes, he usually does hold it very loose, and he holds it further back down the handle of the brush.
So I'll show you. For the most part, I hold the handle back like this.
For when you're doing this sort of thing.
This type,
You wouldn't want to do that when you're doing detail work.
Yeah, but even like, very rarely, like if we're doing detail, now these are short handle brushes, and we oftentimes use long handle brushes, but even when I'm doing detail, I very rarely am up in here. It's still usually up in here. Yeah, so that's kind of that is a great question. That's probably the hardest thing for me to explain.
Where you hold your brush?
No, the whole like the dance the paintbrush around, holding it loosely.
Holding it loosely and swiping and flicking.
Yeah, because that is something that's yes.
Yeah, I would say watching Paul paint for years and years, 25 years, watching him paint, everything is very loose. And that, I'm sure, includes the way he holds the brush. And there's not a lot of, stopping and thinking before you do the next.
There's very little thought.
Before you do the next thing, so, yeah.
I know that some of our teachers, when I would train our teachers how to paint paintings in the studio, one of the things that was always the biggest challenge for them, and we're talking about several of them had art degrees, was, as Eric used to say, it was hard for him to paint as loose and freely as I paint.
Yeah.
And that's because we have a tendency of wanting to be very detailed, and my process is very not detailed.
Paul does a lot of lifting and tapping with the brush.
Mhm.
That's what I see a lot, and that's how he gets like those paintings that look like, I mean, they're messy up close, and then you hang it up and it's like, oh, look at that, it's a dramatic landscape.
I hope that answers people's questions. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, it's something that for all artists, you have this, like, once you've been doing it for a while, you kind of develop your own techniques, and sometimes it's like you just sit down and do them, and then it's very hard to explain to somebody else how to do it. And the main thing, like I always try to tell people, is be very loose, very relaxed. Don't put too much effort into trying to control the brush. I like to say the brush, like our brushes, have a lot of experience in painting, and I just need to not get in their way. And that's kind of the way I try to think of painting. And I understand that that's not going to work for everybody's approach. Like that probably doesn't work for your approach, right, Jenny? You're much more of a more detail oriented.
Yeah, probably not. That's why I like doing your paintings, because it forces me to like not be such a completionist.
Yeah. I think the thing,
I think
like if I were going to tell you, like, since we're kind of on this tangent, if I were going to try to give you my best piece of advice on all of this, is try to just not think about it too much, and just let it just be kind of like something like breathing, that you just learn to let the brush just kind of do its thing. Mm-hmm. There's very few times that I feel like, I mean, I've had times where like I've definitely had a brush stroke go someplace I didn't want it to go. Mm-hmm. And then it's just like you just roll with it. I hope that answers you guys' questions. Maybe one of these days I'll do a video and kind of talk very...
You always say that.
I know. I don't have a lot of time, but maybe I can do a video that kind of talks a little bit more to that looseness of painting. Okay, let's keep going. I could probably talk about it honestly for hours.
Give him a microphone, he won't stop.
No. So I'm going to take kind of our warmer color, and I'm going to add a little bit of our cobalt blue to it, and kind of gives us a little bit of a kind of a
sludge,
purplish brown.
Everybody in the pool.
Yeah, a little bit. And I'm actually mixing this with my biggest brush. I don't want to use my biggest brush. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of smudge some of this color just above there, just to kind of give you a little reference. I didn't do that in our progress pictures, but that gives a good reference. I'm going to switch.
Is this where the land starts, like the horizon?
Yeah. I'm going to switch to like my number 8 brush. And basically what we want to do is we're going to do kind of our traditional kind of little sketchy trees, where I just kind of keep... What I do on this is I keep the brush in contact with the canvas, and I just kind of wiggle it vertically. You can call it scribbling. And then that kind of leaves some little trail marks into your darker part. You can just kind of brush that out. This shouldn't feel super bold. It should feel like it's really off in the distance. One of the things I like to talk about when we're doing trees like this is these don't need to look exactly like trees. And the great example I've got, we used to teach at a place called Skamania Lodge in Washington, and it's right on the Columbia River, and the Columbia River's pretty broad.
The Columbia River divides Oregon and Washington.
Yeah, it's the natural border, and it's probably half a mile, 3/4 of a mile across where Skamania Lodge is. And I always tell people, look across the river. Do you see details in the trees, or you just kind of see the suggestion that there are treetops? And the answer is always, well, there's just suggestions that there are treetops. But you know they're trees, right? Well, yeah, of course. Well, but you can't see the details, but you know that they're trees. Well, and part of the reason we know they're trees...
Hi, Tiffany.
Hello.
Thank you. She watches our videos every night. I love it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So one of the things that we do when we're painting trees, for example, is we're going to create these shapes that are similar in shape to our bigger trees as we get closer. And when we get closer, we'll give some detail. And then what happens is people, when they look at it, they say, well, that looks very similar to what's going on further up the canvas and lighter. Those must be the same things. Now, we don't consciously think of that to ourselves. But at this point, if I were to do this right now as it is, and then put like a skyscraper here, we would automatically assume that that's a city off in the distance and more skyscrapers. But if we give you, the viewer, a tree to look at, then we automatically assume that what we're seeing in the background is what we're seeing in the foreground. So I like to just be like, oh, we just suggest what's in the background and then give people just enough information that their brain figures it out. Gosh, we're getting deep tonight.
So what are we doing with these trees? Are we going all the way across?
Yeah, all the way across. I like to kind of vary the height, meander, not real jaggedy. This is just mindless stuff right now. Don't think about it. I oftentimes like to say I don't like to tell people these are trees. They're just these shapes. Just paint these shapes, and that's good. We'll figure it out in the end.
Yeah, and that is one of the things too. As you're painting, you feel like every step. I used to tell people this when I would teach in person, and I could you can just read people and you can tell when they're really stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, so this part you're stressing out about it, but it's not. It's an important part of the painting, but it's not the important part of the painting, you know. And the next thing you move on to, you're gonna stress about too. Even though so much of it ends up being covered up or just part of the background, and then by the time you get to the detail stuff, you're like, what was I even worried about?
Yeah, I was real notorious for doing that too when I would teach people in person. Would be telling them as we're going the whole process that this particular step is not that important.
No, actually my favorite analogy you used, and I think about this a lot because I need to remind myself too, was you used to say these are like the extras in a movie.
Yeah.
Their background, the movie would be missing something if they weren't there, but they're not the star of the show. They're
right.
just the background stuff. The background noise.
Exactly. Yeah, you can, and that's a good, I mean, we've called it that in classes before, background chatter, white noise.
It's the white noise of the painting.
It really is, and yeah, I wanted to go a little bit higher in this area right through here.
Joanna's very happy there's not huge clouds in this painting.
You're welcome.
I know you've been struggling with your clouds. You know, I struggle a lot too, and I feel like it's only been in the last 3 years that I feel comfortable doing clouds. I used to avoid them. I'd be like, it's just a sunny sky.
You know what? I'm just going to be a little bit candid right now. Mm-hmm. I know I'm never very satisfied with my clouds.
What?
And now I know that that's not fair because I know a lot of people think I paint clouds well, and I think I do fairly well, but they're never quite what my intention is.
So I found that the trick is just very little paint.
Yeah. Well, yes and no, because then there are techniques where you can use a lot of paint and make it work too.
Yeah, William Hawkins. If you guys ever get a chance, Hawkins, William.
We have a couple of his original pieces.
Art. Yeah, I've talked about him on this channel before. He is like my number one inspiration. I don't know that I could ever paint like him. And that's probably why I like him so much is in his style is because it's so different. But if you look at his clouds, they are almost illustrative. But when you look at his whole painting, it's like, that is amazing. He is just so talented. I will sing his praises till the day I die. And so I recommend you check out his art. And he sells it, and he has a lot of affordable pieces that he does as little like practice pieces that are on canvas board. Mm-hmm. And you can buy them framed. If you look at William Hawkins' art on Instagram, there's a link. And I bought a framed night scene with stars, and I just love it.
I love that piece.
And
that's just a study piece he did.
Yep.
And I mean, I like that because it's very loose.
And I think one day his
I am
stuff
going a
is
little
going to be
higher
very
on this.
valuable.
I am going a little higher on this right-hand side, by the way, just to kind of keep it from being too flat across. Let's see. Yeah, the clouds, I'm sorry, guys. Again, it's another one that probably needs its own tutorial that's not connected to a specific painting. But again, you know, the thing, like, I think the most important thing of all of this is just practicing. And I think one of the things, and I don't think we've ever really talked about this with GoBox, but I know I've talked about it when I'm teaching in person. Teaching in person is a bit of a trip because there's usually not a second person sitting there helping you with the conversation. And so you're having to, sometimes you do have
Awkward moments.
Audience members who help, but you're really, it's all up to you and to drive the energy and stuff. But I know I've talked about, now I lost my train of thought. Give me a second, I'll
You've
figure it out.
talked about clouds?
No. What was it?
Wow, you must have been deep enough that you forgot. You fell down a
forgot.
big cavern and
I'm human. Oh, I know what I was thinking about. It was most of the great masters never considered any of their paintings like a masterpiece or a finished painting. Everything was kind of a study. Like, they really considered, you know, obviously if they're doing a commission piece, maybe they're thinking of it a little bit more. But I honestly believe that, like, even some of the best authors, you read their motivation and what they wrote, it wasn't so much that they were trying to create a great book, but they were doing a study in character development or a study in social structure or things like that. And the same thing's true with paintings. It's like, I always like to think, like, I always try to think of every painting as being a study piece more than I am painting this to be a finished piece that's going to go on my wall. Sometimes they end up being that way, and sometimes they don't. But if you look at every painting you do as something that you're learning from, it takes a lot of that pressure off.
Yeah.
I think. All right, so I'm mixing up this color a little bit more of the phthalo red and a little bit more yellow. I'm going to wipe my brush off a bit. Yeah. And I'm just going to really quickly just kind of mimic what's below. Very light pressure. So I'm just mimicking into the water what's above the horizon. And I don't want it to be perfect. In fact, I want it to be very loose, very scribbly.
I started working on a train painting for my son, who is obsessed with trains and has been since he was like 2. He's 21 now. And that has so many rigid lines and like important structural things. It's so not me to paint. Like, there's a coupler on the front and just a lot of things that are like mechanical.
So let me ask you a question. So our son is autism spectrum. He's Asperger's syndrome. Do you think that puts more pressure on you to be more detailed? Because you know he's going to know.
Yeah. Last night, he knows I'm doing this painting. I told him and I showed him my start and I said, Hayden, I can't tell from this photo what is this part of the train. No, partly it was to test him to see, like, what does he really, like, how much about, like, the train parts does he know? Or does he just, like, the way they look and all that? And, my gosh, he just like, oh, yeah, that's a blah, blah, blah. That's So it was kind of nice because there were a couple parts on it where I'm painting from a photo I took of his favorite train that's here in Portland area, and yeah, I had to know what these certain parts were because I'm like, I don't really know what I'm painting. If I know what I'm painting, then I can replicate it. But if I don't know, I'm just gonna have to like sit there and be like, did I do this right? But yeah, there is a pressure for sure. Just knowing how he is about his trains, they're his passion.
So one of the things I'm doing right now is while I'm reflecting this color into the water very loosely, I'm also kind of pulling it up into the trees a little bit so it feels like it flows.
Have we taken him to the train place by Crater Lake where you can ride all the miniature trains? We've done that out, not Crater Lake, but there's a place it's a little town in Oregon called Malino. There's a guy that built something like that. But no, I haven't done the one near Crater Lake.
We'll have to try that.
Yeah, he would like that. He loves Crater Lake.
I love Crater Lake.
I do too. It's so neat.
Should we do a Crater Lake painting? We haven't done a Crater Lake painting.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's the deepest lake in North America.
Yeah.
So everybody knows Crater Lake.
It's kind of like, I don't know. I think we've painted, we don't want to get too, like, we're from Oregon, let's paint everything from Oregon, because we recognize that a lot of you are from other places. I really want to do an Everglades painting. But having never seen the Everglades in person, it becomes a little bit intimidating. Because I always think, like, when I'm painting, like, Oregon stuff, I'm painting the feeling of Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And
we'll just have to go there. We're going to have to hike the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah. So I'm just going to take a little tiny bit of white and add it to that color. And I'm just going to use this color to kind of smudge this little transition. Just a little bit. I'm just pushing the painting around. Real soft, a lot of movement, a lot of texture.
Oh, what color are you using?
White? I just added a little tiny bit of white to my
Mm-hmm.
mix. And I'm just trying to kind of blur that transition. And what it does is it does a couple things. It also gives the feeling like there's fog.
Joanna's down for painting Crater Lake and Wizard Island.
Wizard Island.
So why do they call it Wizard Island?
Because it looks like a wizard's hat.
Interesting.
No,
Okay.
actually, that's not true. So, Mount Mazama.
Come on, Paul. Give us your history,
Yeah.
geographical stuff.
So Mount Mazama was an active volcano, much like Mount St. Helens, about 10,000 years ago. And it did very much the same as what Mount St. Helens did. And the tribes of the Central Oregon area that could see it said that there was a battle between two gods.
Yeah.
One, the god of the earth and god of the sky, and they were fighting over a princess.
It's always a princess.
Always a princess. That's the way it is. Because they could hear the rumbling, and of course when the volcano erupted, there was lightning and things like that. But it did basically the same thing like Mount St. Helens did, except for it blew straight up, which left the big crater. And Wizard Island is technically the cinder cap, but
The cinder cone thing.
the cinder cone, yeah. And so, as I'm trying to recall, I believe the reason they called it Wizard Island is kind of like because it was the wizards that were fighting over. I could be wrong.
I'm going to Google it and prove you wrong.
The other alternative is that it looks like a wizard's hat. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure it has something to do with the legend of Mount. It actually used to be called Mount Mazama. And that's something that's really kind of cool. We have a lot of mountains in Oregon, and they all have native names, and we've rejected them in favor of naming them after Navy captains. Mount Hood.
I don't know. I think Mount Hood should go back to White East. I think that's a really cool name.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mount Adams used to be called Klickitat.
That's right.
Yeah. And Denali, Mount McKinley, they did go back to calling it Denali.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, honestly, I like the fact that the people who saw it first got to name it, and not somebody that came in and named it later because they felt like they needed to honor some guy who piloted a boat. So, all right. Let me see where we're at. Okay, next step. Now I maybe could have been a little lighter with this, but that's okay. It won't hurt anything. I'm going to use my number 8 brush still. We're going to mix up a color that's just a little darker than what we did for that band. So it's still going to have a little bit of our yellow in it, but more blue, more red. Going to Denali. So what I would love to go see
that's
Denali,
awesome, Joanna.
because one of the things I think it's amazing about it is, so we have Mount Hood in Oregon, which is 11,000 some odd feet, and it looks big, but it's, you know, it's also surrounded by foothills and stuff. Mount McKinley, Denali, is like, I want to say, I don't know off the top of my head, it's like 21,000 feet or something like that, but it goes all the way down to sea level basically, and it's just, it looks so incredibly massive. Can you look it up, Jenny? How tall is Denali?
Sure, I will look it up.
All right, so I'm mixing up this color. It's mostly just our blue and our red, and we just basically, we want it to be a little darker. Add a little bit of the yellow to keep
Holy
it.
smokes, it's 20,310 feet.
Yeah, I said there's about 20,000, so that was a good guess. So it's almost twice as tall as Mount Hood, but it comes all the way down to sea level.
Super cool.
Okay, so this just needs to be a little darker than what we had before. And what I'm going to do is right in this area, I'm just going to sketch in a little.
Can I ask you what colors you mixed here?
Yeah, it's just everybody in the pool.
Okay.
But
blue, yellow, pink?
yeah, more blue and pink than yellow.
Okay.
And this tree, we're going to kind of have a feature tree on this island. This is going to be a little taller than our trees in our background.
Joanna's taking a flight tour that lands on the glacier, so she may die, but she'll send pics first. I love it. Post them on that GoBox Art Crate Facebook page.
Yeah.
Painting inspo.
Yeah, exactly. I could paint landscapes all the time. Like, I do.
Yes, you do. So we're painting a showpiece tree here?
Yeah, well, it is kind of like a feature tree on this little island, so it's a little tall. It's gonna.
Can I see the original? Why don't you put it up there?
Okay.
We all need to reference the original.
Yep.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
that right there.
Yep.
Got it.
And he needs a little friend, so we'll do another one here. The main thing is this needs to come down a little further than our perceived shoreline below, and the trees need to go a little higher. And this is how we start building perspective when we're looking out across water. It would be the same thing if we were looking out across a grassy plain. That's something I like to paint, is like snowy plains. You know, like the prairie.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't done that yet with the GoBox. Might have to do that.
You told me you hate painting snow.
No, not like a snow field, but like, you know when you like look across like a field that's just lightly dusted with snow? I like doing that. Okay. Again, just going to kind of mimic this down into our water. One of the things you can do too is like you can kind of turn your brush and just kind of wiggle.
Turn your brush how?
So that the bristles are like this.
So we're using vertically?
Yeah. And like this bigger tree, you can kind of take it and just kind of wiggle.
Like a little tornado shape?
No, not too much. Just a little, just so it's not so crisp.
Okay. I love watching those shows about the homesteaders in Alaska. There's one, gosh, I can't.
Alaskan bush people? What?
Not that one.
That one's kind of weird.
It's Life Below Zero, I think is what it's called.
Life
That's
Below
a
Zero.
good one. I really like that.
All right, I'm gonna switch real quick to my smallest brush, and this tree right here, I'm just going to start really quickly, just kind of giving it some horizontal little scratches of suggestion of tree branches. Don't get too detailed with this. Remember, the more detail you do in the background, the more you have to do in the foreground. And do the same thing.
Just by the way, before I forget, I did Google it. Wizard Island, which is a little cinder cone in the middle of Crater Lake, for those just coming in. It's named for its wizard hat shape. It rises 767 feet above Crater Lake's surface. That's a lot taller than I thought.
How many?
767 feet. But, you know, it looks tiny from the shore.
It does, because the rim of the crater is so much higher.
Mm-hmm.
When we were up there, we went up there 5 years ago. Can you believe it's been 5 years?
I can't.
And was it 2017, right?
I think so.
Yeah. And we were up there right around this time because it was right after the kids got out of school. And
We did a road trip.
we did a road trip, and we actually did a road trip to Yosemite, but we hit Crater Lake and Lassen on the way in Tahoe. Tahoe's not a national park, the others are. But when we got up to Crater Lake, it was like 83 degrees, and
But
there was
snowy.
and there was 3 feet of snow left on the ground. It was crazy.
There were like rivulets of water everywhere, remember?
Mm-hmm.
Did you walk down to the boat tour? No.
No, it wasn't open yet to get down there. It was really limited to just the parking lot. The road around the rim wasn't open yet either. In fact, when we were down at Yosemite, we had planned this whole trip. We had a friend who used to be a hiking guide in Yosemite, and she had suggested that we go in from the east side through
Tulum Meadows.
Tulum Meadows. We got all the way down to June Lake, which is east of the Sierra Nevadas, and we had rented a house there, and we were there, and the park entrance from the east wasn't open yet because of snow. Mm-hmm. And we're like, oh no.
We drove all the way here.
We drove all the way down there. And normally this time of year it's open. And but we got lucky. We had decided we were only going to end up spending one day at Yosemite. And we thought, okay, we're going to get up on Thursday and we're going to drive north and then west and then back down south. It was going to be like basically 9 hours each way to get into Yosemite. And then they happened to open the east entrance that day. And
lucked out.
It was like a 45-minute drive.
Mm-hmm. Versus through the redwoods.
Yeah.
We did want to go through the redwoods, but not necessarily.
Well, actually, going to Yosemite, you wouldn't go through the redwoods. That's because
no. Remember that other way we were going to go? We were going. No, we were going to dip way down. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been to the redwoods several times. My dad grew up in that part of the California, so we used to go visit family there. And we need to go down there though, because that's a amazing thing to see in person. You've seen the redwoods, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been a long time.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take the same color. I'm gonna add just a tiny little dab of black to it. I want to just make this just a touch darker. Just a tiny little touch. And we're gonna do this little bit of land here.
And what color is that?
So it's the same color with just a tiny little dab of black.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna lie, this was kind of inspired by when we did Blue Moon Willow.
Really?
And we talked about doing different layers of trees through fog and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what was
yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of my inspiration for this painting, was this kind of notion of different layers of trees and islands and stuff like that. So I'm going to move down visually just a little tiny bit from this bit here. Maybe a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. Kind of give myself a little reference. And again, this is going to have a couple of, I'm going to put a tree right over my little light spot there.
That was my light spot.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny.
That's Venus.
Exactly. And again, these need to go a little higher in spots than our background. And I want to do a little business related comment real quick. We have switched our subscription software provider. And so if you guys are trying to get in and maintain your account, it's still active, but it's not linked through our current website. So just send us a message. I'll get you taken care of. Rather than, we just have decided not to migrate existing people to the new one yet. It's kind of a big process. And so if you've been, I had somebody the other day who needed to skip for a couple months because they're moving, and I was like, okay, no problem, I'll get that taken care of for you. But it really is like, it's just Jenny and I. Stephanie helps us with some of our packing and shipping and setting up the new website, but like when you contact us for customer support, there's nobody else, just us.
Oh yeah, that reminds me, Kim earlier had said that her and Mark wanted to do a Patreon,
Oh, okay.
so asked if we could explain how that is done.
So Patreon, there is a link in the description for all our videos that takes us to our Patreon page. And Patreon just basically allows you to donate to our cause.
And it's like, if you're doing the videos and using your own products, that's kind of what we're asking for, you know. Hey, we're making the content, and
I mean, we are trying to make a living doing this.
We'd like to keep our content free as long as we can, and
yeah, but it doesn't pay the bills.
No.
And so anyway, yeah. So the Patreon gives you a couple of options. I think you can go through to our Ko-fi page, Ko-fi, Ko-Fi.
We should find out how it's pronounced.
And that allows you to do like basically it's like buy us a cup of coffee, and it's like gives you a one-time donation. Patreon's more of like a month-to-month kind of thing. We don't spend a lot of time pushing those things, but I know a lot of other YouTubers do. So real quick, I'm using the same brush. You can use your smaller brush, but I'm doing the same concept to just kind of giving this couple of these more feature trees some definition. Closer we get, the more defined we can be. What else? Yeah, so just a couple of these trees. You don't want to get too carried away. It's really easy to get carried away into doing too many trees, and then it gets cluttered. So I think maybe 3 on this side over here. The closer you get, obviously, the more we need to do. So you don't want to beat yourself up. I mean, this should be something that's calming and relaxing, not something that's stressful. And if it's becoming stressful, maybe go make a cup of tea. Step away for a little bit. Come back. If it's really stressful, maybe pour yourself a big margarita.
Put a little something extra in that tea.
Yeah. If that's not your thing, whatever. Put on some good classical music or whatever music makes you happy. When we were in art school, we used to get to pick, like everybody would get a chance to have a day where they picked the music.
I don't really remember that.
That was more in Dave Selleck's class.
Oh, yeah.
I remember somebody brought Metallica one time, and that was really interesting.
Leland, though, he was classical all the way. Nobody got to pick the music.
And don't get me wrong, I love me some Metallica, but it's
not always the one to paint to.
Not always the best thing to paint to.
Depending on, I mean, your landscape could end up looking like a hellscape.
Yeah, no, that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with cursing at yourself for painting.
Cursing. I do that a lot too, and I know I responded the other day about how a lot of times I hate my paintings and I put them away in a box. If I really hate them, I paint black over them because I'm like, nobody is ever gonna see this ever.
Do you paint it
But
black?
if I dislike it but not hate it, I will put it away and then find it later and I'm like, what did I dislike about this?
Yeah.
Sometimes, not always. Sometimes I'm like, yes, I still dislike it.
I think a lot of times what we dislike is that we've set like a level of expectation on ourselves that's higher. Mm-hmm. And we really should always paint without expectation. Like,
yeah.
The reality is, it is hard to do.
It's hard. There's so many amazing artists, and like even as someone who is like studied a long time and feel like I'm fairly decent at it, I go on TikTok. Like I just joined TikTok. I don't know why. I want to start doing some art videos, and it's like, oh my gosh, I feel so inferior. There's a lot of stuff, really good artists out there, and I think you do have to just put it in perspective, because like some artists might be really amazing at painting flowers, but they're not great at painting trees, and you're great at painting trees but not great at painting flowers. It's like everybody has these different strong points.
Yeah. Well, I think like when I used to during the recession of 2008.
You can remember that?
Yeah, business was rough. Like my business that we had at the time. And so I started teaching kids how to play guitar. Like local neighborhood kids and stuff. And one of the things that was really challenging was something that was really popular at the time was a game called Guitar Hero.
Oh, yeah.
And
on the Wii.
Wii, PlayStation, Xbox, all that stuff. Kids would come in and
I'm really good at Guitar Hero. I don't understand.
Yeah, and they would think that the learning curve was going to be the same as learning how to play Guitar Hero. And it's like, okay, well, on Guitar Hero, you have one thing that you hit with your thumb for the strumming, and then you have 4 buttons. And with a guitar, you have 6 strings that you have to hit individually, 6 strings you have to hit with your hand, and then in most cases 21 to 24 frets to place them on to get different sounds.
And your fingers are going to get really callous, and you have to make sure you have the right fingernail length.
All that stuff. And a lot of the kids would get so frustrated just right early on because the learning curve wasn't the same as Guitar Hero. And
I forgot about that, but now I totally remember you talking about that.
Yeah. And so, you try to work with them. Of course, it was great the kids were getting inspired to try. But it's, painting's kind of the same thing. If it was easy, everybody would do it.
Yeah.
So, and it wouldn't be special. So, okay, next step. You're going to do a little tiny bit more black. We're going to do one more little finger of land. We're going to start kind of like, when I put my brush down here, I'm not touching the brush to the canvas. I'm just kind of using it as a reference. I'm going to move down about an inch and to the right just a little bit, maybe about an inch as well. Kind of give myself a reference. And all we're really shooting for color-wise is we just want to make sure it's enough darker that it feels like there's a shifting in tone from one layer to the next. This one, I'll just point to this right here. This one's kind of an in-between. It's this little bit right here that's kind of tucked in behind this bigger dark mass in the foreground. We were going to have maybe 3 or 4 of our fir trees on this little bit of land. And again, these ones are going to kind of go up maybe a smidge taller, but really similar in height. There's this fine line when you start getting closer where you don't necessarily want to go too tall, but you also don't want to go much shorter than these two, like this little finger of land and this finger of land aren't that far apart that there's going to be a dramatic difference, but you can go a little taller.
Do you know how hard I worked on my reflections down in here? And now
you're
making me cover them up.
Yes, we're going to cover them up. And the reason we always do the reflections is, let's say we decided not to do this extra finger of land, we've done the work.
That's why.
Yep. That's exactly why.
Paul likes to make it extra scary by making us paint this black line.
Oh, you don't have to paint the black line. So this is going to be a little bit more rocky down in this bottom point here, so just some little bumps and mounds. It's fine. Really only going a couple of trees, maybe a little short guy right here.
Good night, Kim. Thank you so much for joining in, and happy Father's Day to you, Paul. That's what Kim said.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Yeah. I still haven't figured out what to get you. Something golfy.
You don't have to get me anything. You gave me the thumbs up.
Oh, yeah. You get golf clubs.
I'm getting golf clubs for...
Yeah.
I used to work many, many, many years ago when Jenny and I were first married. My parents and I were starting our first business together, and I was also working at a golf course, and I was working towards getting my certification to become a PGA certified instructor at the same time. And it was kind of like I was on two different career paths at the same time and trying to figure out which one was the path we were going to take. Ultimately, we took the right path because it's hard to make a living in the golf industry, but it is one of my passions. And I went today in the rain, and I was very happy today. All right. So I don't want to get too busy with this one because this layer here can very easily overpower the one in the background, and I don't want it to do that. I just want it to be like a suggestion. So I'm not actually going to even, this area I'm just going to kind of let it dissipate. Like there is no start and finish. Like there's no place where this layer starts and this one stops or in between.
Yeah, in Florida, it's getting close to 11 o'clock.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. I've wondered if we should sometimes do our tutorials a little earlier.
We could.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like more of
get up early on Fridays anyway.
When we first started, most of our people were on the West Coast because most of our people were people that followed us from Vine Go.
Mm-hmm.
And but I feel like more of our people it's very evenly distributed now across the country.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm just going to quickly suggest.
So we are reflecting these, but it looks like you put another landform in here. Yep,
and a lot of this is going to get covered. But again, it's easier now to just go ahead and do this quick little reflection.
It's practice. Mm-hmm.
It's practice. The other thing is you may paint over it, you may not. And if you don't, then it's like, oh, well, I need to now go back and put in reflection. So it's easier just to do it now, do it once. It takes all of 45 seconds. So you're not wasting time. But if you start putting in rocks and you've got a gap like right here where there's still water, oh, you've already got your reflection from up above. It makes sense. All right. Next step. We're just going to use pure black going the rest of the way down. I guess the original one, I've kind of got like this extra little landmass over here that matches this one. It really doesn't. I'll point it out here.
Where?
It's right here. It really.
Yeah, I guess kind of covered up by the front one. It's
not necessary. So this area could be a lot of different things. This area through here, and it could be either.
Just water.
It could just be like maybe the shoreline's right here, and it's just rocks where these two land masses kind of come in around this little cove. Maybe it's an area that then opens back up and it becomes a stream coming out. It's really it doesn't matter. All we know is that it is an area where the water's shallower and there's more rocks sticking up. So a zoom.
Can we do a Zoom? I've done Zoom. I do Zoom private parties. Occasionally, I've got a gymnastics studio that every summer they do a summer camp, and I get to teach 3 sessions to a whole bunch of kids ages 5 through 12, I think. And it's fun. It's like we do a painting, clean up. Do the same painting, clean up.
Oh, that's right. I remember you did that one.
It's in August.
That's a long day. All right.
I enjoy it. It's fun.
So this next step, we're going to worry more. I shouldn't say worry. We're going to focus more on just the landmass structure, and then we'll do the trees. Actually, the right-hand side doesn't get any extra trees. Notice all my trees on the right-hand side kind of lean at the same angle. Guess
Funny.
what? That's the way my wrist wants to go. Show the picture. Oh, zoom. That kind of zoom. Sorry.
I was thinking Zoom call.
I'm so used to people asking about Zoom calls.
This is the zoom in, yes.
You can see there is...
Look at all that texture.
That is... I mean, you can see some of the canvas showing.
Mm-hmm.
See, I hid that little spot that Jenny made. Mm-hmm. But you can see, when you see it up close, it's really kind of a hot mess.
Mm-hmm. It's a hot mess.
But you zoom back out, it's like, oh, okay, I see what's going on there. All right, so the next step is we're going to do this foreground area. Canvas roll, like a drum roll. All right, I'm going to use my biggest brush because I really like this area. And so I'm just going to be blunt and honest. Which, I mean, honest, we really usually are pretty blunt and honest. I don't think we ever sugarcoat anything. For me personally, this technique through here, some days just is like money. Some days is a little bit more of a struggle.
Mm.
And I think the days when it really works really well is when I'm not thinking about it as much and I'm just painting.
Okay.
And the days when it's more of a struggle are the days where I'm really thinking about placing things.
So let's take our brains out of this equation.
Let's take them out of the equation. And basically what I'm going to start doing is on this right-hand side, we're taking our biggest brush, just pure black, gal.
Pure black.
I'm going to try, okay, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to channel the loose and free. This is going to work. All right.
You're good enough. You're smart enough.
Yeah. Now I'm probably thinking about it too much.
Doggone it. People like you and you're a good painter, Paul.
All right, so here's how we do this. Tap, 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 tap.
Oh, so we're just doing little random, like we did the clouds up here.
Yeah.
Okay. Scary, but okay. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not placing anything.
So that actually, I like that right there. I like the way that started. Now, I'm going to now start on this right-hand side. I'm going to get a little denser. This is a little bit more of the rock mass. Very rock mass!
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of fill it in a little bit more.
Are we filling this in down to the bottom right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's okay if it's not perfectly filled in. Okay. I'm happy with that. Now I might come in and maybe throw a couple extra little bits in there. That's good. Now I'm going to do the same thing from the other side. Yeah, kind of. This is a lot. So when people are asking, what's the technique? This is really, I know I'm moving fast, but it's really just kind of a blot and dab.
Blot dab, blot dab. Yeah, I think that's
And
a
I
good
do turn the
technique to
brush
use.
a little bit here and there so it's not creating the same thing. Sometimes I push down more.
You could use a smaller brush for some of these parts too.
Yeah, I would just try to like initially kind of discourage using a smaller brush, and maybe use the smaller brush to kind of come in and refine things. But it's just like when you see like a river shore, these are the big rocks and then the gravel kind of fills in around.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to get the big rocks in first, and if you want to use the smaller brush to kind of come in and refine and put smaller rocks and gravel and stuff in, you can do that.
These are also part of the big rocks. It's just there's water coming in between them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something I always try to think about, like when I'm painting water and lakes and things like that. It's not so much like I think people a lot of times think about it very much like, oh, well, this is water and this is rock, but they don't stop to think that the rock continues underneath the water.
Yeah, you've just got like the water level, like this rock is taller, so it sticks out more.
Yeah, so this rock, I mean, maybe this rock maybe goes 30 feet underground. We don't know. We haven't seen it. But I always try to think of like, okay, I'm laying all this in, and then we're going to put the water surface in on top.
This reminds me of your Serenity Beach.
Yeah. So this is kind of like, this is a technique, this area, I actually picked up from a watercolor artist on YouTube. I think his name is Steve Cohen. I'll have to look it up and see. We'll post it on our Facebook group. And I really like how it worked with that. And it's something that I've incorporated it into a couple of the Go Box paintings, but it was something that I had just started to incorporate into a painting for the first time in the studio, and then COVID hit, and then we weren't ever able to. In fact, this is basically a replica of that painting, just some different colors. But it's this looseness of like the water breaking and the rocks breaking up into each other, without really having to work really hard. I mean, that's the kind of the key here. All right, for this foreground, we are going to do one tree to rule them all. But I don't want it to be like this big dominating tree. I want it to be taller than our other trees. And usually, you guys have done enough paintings with us now. You know, most of the time when I do a tree, I don't do a trunk. This one I want to do a trunk because I want, let me show you. I want the trunk to actually be kind of a key element. Like you see this, the branches on this are pretty sparse. And I want to be able to see that trunk showing through. The birds need enough room to land. You know, if it was all branches, there's no room for them to land. So I like, in this case, we're going to...
They don't land on the trunk.
I know, but they got to have room between the branches.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want this one to be, this is our tallest tree. I want it to really only be in from the edge of the canvas, maybe about 3/4 of an inch, half an inch.
And how high up? Like, gosh, you're going like 3/4 of the way up?
Yeah, about 3/4 of the way up.
So you can parallel the side of your canvas to get it straight. That's always helpful.
Straight-ish.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. That's right. That's one of the things that our brains like to tell us. Oh, it has to be perfectly straight. But we all know what it's like to go looking for a Christmas tree. Even at a farm where they're groomed, it's hard to find one that's perfectly straight.
Now, I kind of think of this tree as being kind of like, okay, this is the hero tree.
Yours is leaning.
I know. That's okay. I'm fine with that. There are things I can do with this that will
balance it out.
Balance it, and it's when I start putting the branches on. Now, when I say this is the hero tree, this means we can start at the top using our smallest brush. And sometimes I like to put a little dab above. And I'm just going to work down a couple inches, and then I'm going to do a zoom. Because I'm really not thinking about painting like, okay, there's a specific branch here. Now to balance this, what I can do is I can be a little heavier with the branches on the, let's see, how do I want it? A little heavier on the left-hand side as I go down. Basically shift the balance of the branches towards the left. So I'm going to start like that. I like that, the way that looks. Let me zoom in. You can see it's not really specific branches. It's just a lot of blots that look like branches. And if you were to then continue using the smallest brush going down, it would probably take you forever. I honestly, like, realistically, you probably should. But I also think that sometimes it's really easy to get too hyper-focused on, like when we put the smallest brush in our hands, we have a tendency of getting too focused on detail, like trying to make everything perfect. So I think it's good to switch to a little bit bigger brush. In the studio, when I used to teach paintings like this, we would often switch to our biggest brush and let the biggest brush do a lot of it. But I feel like sometimes, you know, that works But since I want this to be pretty sparse and open feeling, our number 8 is going to be our best friend. Leave intentional gaps. Don't be afraid of the edge of the canvas.
Yeah, bring it all the way to the edge in some spots where it makes sense, because it's not like it would be groomed for the canvas.
And you'll notice also that I actually put quite a bit of effort into blotting in and around the trunk. And the reason I do that is there are branches that, if this were a tree, I'm going to hold it like this. If this is a tree trunk, let me turn it around. This is our tree trunk. Branches go this way, they go this way, they go this way, they go in all different directions. They don't just go left and right. So you've got, when a branch that's like, for example, coming towards you, it's just going to be a blot like this. One that's going away from you is going to be pretty much the same. So, and branches go all different directions. So that's why a lot of times I'm a fan of not having a trunk, is because people, especially when they're first learning how to paint, they have a tendency of only wanting to do branches left and right from the trunk. And it just looks like a ladder.
A stack of mustaches.
A stack of mustaches. And there's a time and a place. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's the thing, like, art is totally interpretive. You can do whatever you want. Like, I always think about like, well, Van Gogh, you talked about Van Gogh earlier. It's like, there's all these debates on like Reddit. I'm a better artist than Vincent van Gogh. Look, I can paint this photorealistic thing. It's so much better than Vincent van Gogh. No. Maybe you do photorealism great. It takes a tremendous amount of talent to do that. But just saying that because you can technically execute something better in a photorealistic way than Vincent van Gogh or Claude Monet, no, I'm sorry. You're not a better artist than Van Gogh or Monet. Because it's their imperfection that makes their work perfect.
Yeah, I don't know.
Bold statement, sorry.
It's hard to say, like, who's a better artist.
You can't, because there is no such thing.
It's totally subjective.
It's totally subjective. And so, you know, it's like, I don't know. You can't judge Picasso against Monet or Van Gogh. You can't judge Dali or...
You can't judge you and I together, because I'm really good at animals, not as great at landscapes, and you're really good at landscapes, but not as great at animals.
Right. I mean, it's just like we're all do what we do. And so, you know, like, I think this whole concept of which is Da Vinci a better artist than Renoir?
We'll just say they're all artists. How about that? We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, you just... It's kind of silly.
It's hard to judge one against the other.
Oh, wait a minute. What about Rembrandt? You know, it's just... You just can't. And we were actually talking about that the other night. I think Jackson Pollock and Mark... Rothko. Those guys earned it. Yeah. They earned the right to do whatever they wanted by doing other pieces that a lot of people are not as familiar with. And you go back and look at their history. And like you go back and look at like Picasso's Blue period and like the famous painting of the guitarist and stuff. And it's like you can...
Which has a woman underneath it.
Yeah, but he didn't always do Cubism. Van Gogh didn't always do post-impressionism. He did Dutch-style landscapes when he first got started, and he was really good at them. It's all an evolution. Just keep growing as an artist.
It's fun to see how they evolved.
Yeah. All right, so let me just make sure. I'm going to check my sheet here. My painting I'm working on now is a little bit more intense in tone. Actually, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, right? if you feel like this back area is too dark for you, you can always do a little wash over it.
That's a weird saying.
What, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other?
Yeah.
You understand what it means,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. It's just two different ways of saying the same thing. But yeah, I mean, I've got this background is a little bit darker in the new one. And if I wanted to go back and adjust it, I could just do a little, like, mix up. I can do it a little bit. I'll show you. I'm going to take my number 4 because I want a little bit more control while I do this. I'm just basically going to mix up the same color we used back there. And this is optional. You guys don't need to do this. Add just a little bit of white to it. Or a little more yellow. Either way. And you can kind of do a little wash just to soften it up. Don't have to. It's up to you. Sometimes I would recommend not messing with things like this because it's really easy to fix something that really didn't need to be fixed. But it can be done. I'm just showing you it can be done. So really think about it. Like if you decide, oh, I want to soften this up, really think about whether it's necessary. And maybe it's something you do tomorrow. Like I often think that like a change, like doing a wash over the background. Sometimes it's good to have a night's sleep on it before you do it. Mm-hmm. You know, is it really changing? Is it okay? Like maybe your painting doesn't look exactly like the original sample on the photos. Decide if it really makes it, if it's really necessary. Now, if you're struggling, like you're losing a layer to another layer, then maybe you probably think about it. But as long as you can see them, that they're definitely different layers. I don't think that changed this painting that much. I don't think it added anything to do a quick.
You just
wash.
wasted your time.
I did. But at the same time, it's like I just wanted to show people. That's part of learning, you know.
Yeah.
And even if you do it and you go, wow, I liked it better darker, let it dry for a few minutes and go back and add the darker. It's just kind of all subjective. Like I always say, like, use your own eyes. Do you like it? Make an adjustment. Why do you like it? Why don't you like it? If it's too dark, lighten it a little bit. If it's too light, darken it a little bit. It's all part of the same equation. Okay, let's do our sun here. And we're going to finger paint.
Okay.
I like finger painting. When I just get a little bit of white paint on the tip of my fingertip. Now, you think this is not an official technique, but I've seen Bob Ross use this technique a million times.
You're making the sun.
Yep. And I like this to be down into
the brightest part.
The brightest part. It's okay if it overlaps a little bit. Just kind of swirl it out.
Oh, no, Joanna, there is not a time limit for adding stuff to a painting.
Nope.
I do that all the time, and I think a lot of artists do. They just go back and, like, okay, so I know I've used this quote on here before, but Da Vinci said it perfect. He said, art is never finished, it's just abandoned. So, yeah, you abandon something, you can go back to it, absolutely. Now, well, sometimes you might just, like, paint white over your whole canvas or gesso or whatever.
That kind of goes into
do it over.
The
You've
whole
learned
thing.
A lot in the last, however long you've been painting.
Yeah.
And so it's fun to just be like, okay, well that was then and this is now and I'm redoing it.
That kind of goes into the whole like treating everything like a study piece.
Yeah.
Like if you take the time, if you think to yourself, oh, I don't want to think of this as being a completed painting.
Yeah, like, oh, this is a completed painting I'm going to hang up or I'm going to sell or whatever. Think of it like this is me learning how to paint trees and a sun and a lake and that kind of thing. And
I know that there's
it takes the pressure off for sure. If you think
I
of
know
it
that there's this mystique that once you sign a painting, it's done. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Nobody knows when you put the signature on it.
Exactly.
So.
They don't got to know about it.
And honestly, like, when I'm painting, and it's been a while since I've just done a painting just for the sake of doing a painting for myself. But I'll maybe work on it for a couple hours a week for a month or two. You know, it's sometimes depending, maybe I'll get into a groove and I'll work on it for 3 or 4 hours on a night, and then the next night do it again. Or, you know, I've definitely had times where, like when I did a commission piece not too long ago, a few years ago, it's like, yeah, I put 8 hours into it one night, you know, started at 6 o'clock at night and worked till close to 2 in the morning. You know, it happens. But it's not always.
What are we using here?
I'm using my number 4, a little bit of white.
The brush we haven't used yet.
Yeah, just a little bit of white, and I'm just hinting.
And you can water this down too. I think it would help.
Actually, right now I'm just doing the reflection.
You're doing the sun reflection. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not doing like this is doing like the ray tracing type of reflection. This is more of just a suggestion of the actual shape in the sky.
And if you notice, he's lifting and tapping his brush, so that's leaving ripples between. And then he's also making the reflection, the width of the sun.
Yep.
You wouldn't want to make it narrower. You can make it a little wider.
A little bit wider because
they stretch like with the water current and stuff, but making it narrower would not look right.
Yeah, and the more movement there is in the water, the more distortion you're going to get. But the calmer it is, the less distortion you're going to get. We're really getting pretty close to being done with this painting. Let's see.
Yeah, get us going on this this stuff down here.
Yeah. Well, that stuff is actually all we've got left is just our shore and our water surface. And we've got a couple little birds up in the sky, and those are optional. You don't have to do them, but I'm gonna show you how to do the birds. I've got a couple of rules about doing birds that I think, yeah, you can do them however you want, but I think these will help you. I think people have a tendency of always wanting to paint birds black, and it becomes too bold, and it dominates the sky. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my smallest brush to start with. I'm gonna have it take a little bit of water from my water cup. This little dab there, and I'm going to take some white. Maybe about 2 parts white to 1 dab of water, maybe 3 parts white. And I'm using my smallest brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of twist my brush. This is kind of the thickness of like heavy cream. Not even heavy cream, more like half and half.
Ooh, half and half.
Half and half. And I'm going to wipe most of this off. And basically what I want to do is you can kind of suggest back up in here, barely touching the brush to the canvas. Just maybe the water surface goes a little bit back up in here.
A little glassy water surface to divide our upper trees from the reflection. Is
Yep.
that what we're doing?
Exactly. And all of this is only going to be like along the bottom edge of where the water meets a landmass.
It makes it look so much better to do that.
And it's something that you don't always see. Like when you're out in nature, you don't necessarily always see it, but when we see a painting, it feels like it needs that little bit of resolution.
Yeah, this is actually something Bob Ross does.
Yeah, he does his palette knife.
I actually learned this from him.
Mm-hmm. I think he kind of overdoes it, honestly, but I think that's okay when you're learning. Like everything Bob Ross does is kind of a little bit overdone, and that's fine. Because when you're learning, you kind of want to overdo things and then learn how to dial it back a bit till it suits your eye. Same thing here. I like to go a little bit off my point here. And you can really... Like I used to be like, okay, everything has to be pretty close to horizontal. That's fine, it should. Your hand should always be moving horizontally. But if you have a little bit of a ripple that kind of goes to the side here, that's fine
happy
too.
Little ripple.
Happy little ripple.
I don't know. I don't think Bob Ross overdoes stuff.
Oh, for sure he does.
What?
Yeah, sometimes.
I'm thinking of his paintings.
I mean, it's his way of doing it, and that's fine.
Are you being an art snob?
No. I'm just saying that, like, when you go out in nature and you look across a lake, you don't always see a white line along the shoreline.
Does he always do a white line?
Yeah. Pretty much.
Is it always white, really? Like
Pretty
he doesn't
much.
use like a pale blue?
Well, you wouldn't use a pale blue anyway. You would use a paler version of what's being reflected.
But he always did like blue skies.
Almost. But yeah, I mean, my point is, like, we've seen this, like, when you drive up the gorge, you don't always see that hard or that ripple along the far shoreline. It's just, you don't.
But it sure looks good in a painting.
But in a painting, it helps create that definition. And that's the thing, is, like, you need to decide, like, sometimes it looks right, sometimes it doesn't need it. But I feel like most of the time, like, I almost feel like, I'll give you a good example. This finished painting. I feel like maybe I did too much in this foreground. It feels maybe a little too busy.
A little white watery.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you can adjust it. It's up to you. You can do more or less. It doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong. But, like, realistically, like, painting is like old school Instagram. You always put a filter on everything.
Yeah.
There's truth to that. Did you know that?
Yeah, there is. Absolutely.
The old guys, like Frederick Church, there's a whole group of painters that were like a club.
What were they called again?
The Hudson River
Hudson
Painters.
River Painters, yeah.
And there's quite a few of them. I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, I wish I did, but Frederick Church is my favorite of them, and there are several others, and many of them worked.
Bierstadt wasn't part of that?
No, he was the same era, but he was from Austria.
Okay.
So these guys are all from New York. But he did paint with them at times. But many of them were hired by the U.S. Geological Survey to go out and
paint this national park.
Yeah. So like when you would see like Bierstadt's paintings of Yellowstone or Yosemite, and he painted Mount St. Helens. Bierstadt did. And Mount Hood. But many of these paintings that you see, they were commissioned by the U.S. Geological Survey because they didn't have photography back then. And so these guys would go out and they would paint these paintings, and they would go back to New York, and they'd go to the bar and bust out one of their paintings and be like, picking up on girls and being like, see where I've been? Look at how vivid the colors are in California compared to here in New York.
Look where I've been.
Look at this. And,
it was totally like Instagram.
It was totally, because they would definitely make the colors more surrealistic and all of that, rather than just being photorealistic. And literally, a lot of it was to impress the ladies at the bar.
Can I buy you a drink now? Let's talk more about what this looks like.
Let me just talk about myself.
Let's talk about how this looks, but let's do it at the bar with a drink.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh, it's funny.
And then the ladies would be like Rose in Titanic. Paint me like you paint your French girls.
Paint me like you paint your Yosemite landscapes.
Paint me like you paint the deer in Yosemite.
Really tiny and like a tiny little part of the canvas.
Yeah.
The deer in that painting are so small, and I know it like adds to the overall grandiose.
Among the Sierras.
Yeah, you guys should Google that. Among the Sierras painting.
Albert Bierstadt.
By Albert Bierstadt. It is like, it's like you just imagine like the clouds broke away and there's the choir of angels.
Well, see, and that's something that like Bierstadt did, that he painted much larger paintings. Oops, sorry. Working on an 11 by 14 canvas, which we use here in the videos, is really a difficult thing to do. Like something that feels big. Mm-hmm. And the way you get around that is you put something in the foreground that people would recognize. So like a deer. Like most people have seen a deer and they know about how big a deer is. So if you did a deer really tiny, like right here, all of a sudden this whole painting gets...
All of a sudden we're in the redwoods.
All of a sudden this painting gets like, oh wow, these trees are huge. You know? And sometimes it's really this delicate balance of scale when you're painting on a small canvas. I honestly, like, if I were going to recommend you go out and buy your own canvases to paint on, I would recommend 18 by 24 for landscapes. Would be kind of like...
When you start feeling comfortable.
No, I actually think it makes it easier because, like, you think about like when we were painting this top of this tree and we were using this little tiny brush. Well, on an 18 by 24, that canvas is almost 4 times larger. You can do that little detail with a much larger brush.
Mm-hmm.
And then how much detail can you do with a little brush, a tiny brush?
Mm-hmm.
It just gives you, I think I think it was Leland who told us that. Leland John, our former professor, is like one of the biggest mistakes people make when they start painting is they go buy little tiny canvases, and then it's frustrating.
Yeah. But it can also be daunting to start.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think getting started on a big canvas is definitely
I actually recommend, for you guys who really want to put in the practice,
16
and
by 20s.
that is what's going to make you get better. And it's not just because, I'm painting a tree over and over and over. It's because you're getting more comfortable with holding the brush, how much paint to load on the brush.
Or you're just saying just practice in general.
How much water to mix in your paint, to the point that you won't even think about that. It will come automatically later on down the road. And then you can focus all of your attention and your, worry about whatever you're doing into what you're painting, and not necessarily the little parts like, how much water am I supposed to mix in with the painting? Because you'll just get so comfortable with that it'll be second nature. But I recommend that you get a pad of canvas paper. Mm-hmm. It's really inexpensive. You can buy it in all different sizes. You can use it like a sketchbook. It's textured.
Are you suggesting that people do studies?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I use canvas paper at home when I am thinking about a painting that I know will take a little extra thought and all that, and I really want to get it on canvas without wasting a canvas. So and you can cut it apart. You can cut it in small sizes, too. I've done that. I've cut it in half.
So really quick, we are just taking this small brush and just kind of wiggling it around the base of some of these rocks. And this is just about our last step. The last thing we're going to do is come in and put a little bit of some reflection of some of those rocks. And that'll help create a little extra depth.
Like a shadow in the water, like whatever. Was that what you're thinking?
Yeah. So, it's actually, when you're talking about the study things, it's like, I know...
I don't like mine.
you need to loosen up with it. You're being too rigid.
I am. That area. I like the rest of my painting, but that area I don't like.
That's a tough one. And that's actually, like I was saying, it's like, it's really easy. It would...
that's something that very obviously comes naturally to you.
Well, and it's the kind of thing that sometimes you're better to do less with it.
I need to do less.
Yeah. I think yours looks fine, but it looks a little like everything's a little too hugging to the rocks specifically. If I were going to give you a suggestion on that.
Everything's too hugging to these rocks?
They're just a little too specifically connected to the rocks instead of kind of being in and around the rocks too.
Yeah, I like that idea too, Joanna. Offer studies, canvas paper, leftover paints, 100%. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm that way with Michaels or Blick. Totally.
I'll liken it to this. So, like, when we would get... Like, Jenny and I, like, when we were running Vine Go, and even with... Go Box is a little different because we have to plan a little bit more in advance. But we would sometimes just go to the art store and pick up different colors. And I would always just come and, like... just kind of slide this to the side. I would take a palette, and I'd squeeze the colors out onto the palette, and I would take a clean brush, and I would say, okay, so let's see, I'm going to take a little bit of blue here, and let's take some yellow. Okay, so that's the color I get from that. What happens if I add a little bit of white? What happens if I add a little bit more yellow now? And I would do this anytime we would get new colors, and I would put a whole bunch of different colors on. Now let's take a little bit of our phthalo, and let's mix a little bit of yellow there. And let's take a little bit more yellow. And now let's add a little bit of white to this. And maybe let's take a little bit of black and add that. Black takes over pretty quick, but you can kind of get some ideas. And these are all things that when we would get a new color, I would always take a palette and just start playing around. And I think we learn more about painting from playing than we do trying to accomplish something specific. So, like, one of the things, like, Jenny's still finishing up. We've got a little bit of time. I know we're dragging a little long. We're pretty much done at this point, by the way.
Other than the birds.
Yeah, but if you were to take black paint, for example, and we know if you take black and you add white, you're going to end up with gray. But black and white gray, to me, is fairly lifeless.
Mm-hmm. She said it's like paint Venn diagrams.
Yeah, totally. Now, what happens if I just take black and I add a little bit of our phthalo red? Well, I still got gray, but it's got a little bit more life to it. Or if I add blue, what do I get here? It's a little bit more of a darker gray, but they're all different tones of gray. If I add yellow, what do I get? And so, like, to me, I mean, you look at all the different colors I just made, and I didn't even get into mixing blue and phthalo red, but that's how we learn how to paint, is not necessarily by having a specific finished painting in mind, but learning how all this stuff works together. There's our lavender. Okay, let's add white. Oh, okay, that's how that looks. Let's add a little touch of black.
Yeah, I recommend color charting too. If
Yeah.
You've got like a lot of you guys who've been subscribers for a long time, you have a lot of leftover paint because they really go quite a long way. Like Paul and I have done 4 paintings now with one bottle.
One set.
One set. So 1 set of 5 bottles of paint. And you can just take a piece of paper or canvas paper or an extra canvas, but even just plain paper works fine. And try color charting. Like,
I mean, that's basically what I just did.
Here's what happens if I were to mix.
Now, if you were doing like actual color charting, you would do like stripes.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important with watercolor.
But like start with like red and be like, okay, so here's what, do a little block of red, and then here's what red mixed with a little white. Mm-hmm. And here's what red looks like mixed with a little black. And so you've got tints and shades and hues and all that.
And then you'll find, like, if you start going to the art store yourself, I'm probably giving away too much information. But if you start going to whatever, Michael's or Blick or Jerry's Artorama or, whatever your local... Actually, I recommend you try to find a good local
small business
shop.
Struggling. Yeah, totally.
Support them. But you will probably eventually settle into finding a blue that you prefer or a yellow that you prefer to your eye. You could do this painting that we just did with any blue, any yellow, any shade of red, black and white. You actually could do it without black. But it's going to be different. It's going to have slightly different hues and tones. But you can do it with any color of blue. Mm-hmm. You could do it, and it probably wouldn't work well with green. But then green is a color that I definitely recommend picking a good green that you like, because green's a really hard color to mix properly. Okay, that'll be a good time. Maybe we should let's do a video about colors. We'll just do that sometime.
Okay, let's add that to your agenda.
Add that to my agenda.
You've got a running list.
I've got a big list. Okay, so on the birds, again, people a lot of times want to do birds in black. And what I recommend, if you're going to do a bird that's black, you want to do that bird pretty darn big. And then you're going to have to paint color for the head. You're probably going to need to add a beak, some impression of feathers.
Make them tiny.
Things like that. So one of the things that I like to do is I'm going to take a little tiny bit of my phthalo red, a little bit of yellow. I'm going to mix my warm color. And I'm going to do a couple different variations of this. I'm going to find a light part in the sky, like right here. That's tiny. You guys can't. Well, you can kind of see it. I'm going to do a zoom. See that little bird? See how faint he is? He doesn't take anything away from this painting by being that color. Now, if I were to take just a little bit of phthalo red on its own, do his buddy, a little bit bigger here.
So the darker the item is, the closer it is to you.
And the bigger it needs to be. Mm-hmm. So there's 2. And if we wanted to get a little bit bolder, we could go slightly into... I'm running out of colors. I kind of made a big mess. slightly into our lavender, we'll call it plum. Do one more right here.
Little loner.
And the reason I like to do that is it's kind of a little, oh look, there's a bird. Mm-hmm. It's not a focal point of the painting, but it adds a little bit that feels like it doesn't feel out of place.
You put a bird on it.
Yeah, you put a bird on it. We're from Portland, so we got to put a bird on it. I mean, you could even do a yellow one, like in the white area, and it's going to look, as long as it's a little bit darker than the sky it's on, it's fine. Where you run into problems is when you start doing a really dark bird, it starts to, like none of these birds, they're there, you see them, but it's not like, oh wow, there's a bird. And that's kind of the way you want birds when you paint a landscape. You don't want, unless you're really painting, the intention is for the bird to be there. Well, thank you. That's RA.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah, so as soon as we're done with the live stream, this will be available to view from start to finish. And, I'm signing it. I'm just doing white. A lot of times it's fun to kind of, boy, I got bold with that signature.
Yeah, you did.
This is my painting. Hello. But anyway, so that's it. That's it, you guys. Birds, I know a lot of people like to paint birds. That's fine. I wouldn't do more than 5.
Keep it odd numbered.
3 is good. Oh, you've got 4.
I've got 4.
3 is good.
Numbered.
Like I always think, I've spent a lot of time up in the mountains fishing and hiking and stuff like that. And I always think, like, when you're up, birds that you actually see flying are typically going to be hawks or osprey, eagles, things like that. And typically they're a family unit. You're going to have a mother or a father and 1, maybe 2 offspring, but usually just 1. And so you're going to maybe see the 3 of them flying over the lake or river or whatever it is. You're not likely going to, unless you get into a murder of crows, you might see a whole flock. But again, we're not doing an Alfred Hitchcock painting. We're just doing a painting that has a couple of...
That's what you think. Mine's an Alfred Hitchcock.
It's very satisfying. Once you nail it and like you get the feeling that it doesn't need a lot of detail and they can be small, yeah, you can do a migrating flock of crows.
Why not?
It does kind of look like Alaska. I could see that. Now, this wasn't a specific area. In my mind, it looks like some parts of, we live in the Pacific Northwest. It looks like some parts of the Pacific Northwest. To me, it looks like also like maybe areas in Canada or, Minnesota, Wisconsin, all those places. Any place where you've got water and fairly flat.
Fir trees. Maine, probably, some areas.
But that's it, you guys. That's all we've got for this painting tonight. You want to bring it back to us?
You want to show me?
Oh, yeah. Let's look at Jenny's painting. So Jenny's definitely...
It's not my favorite work of mine.
You did fine. You did totally fine. So the area she was kind of complaining about a little bit earlier is this kind of area here. And that is something that does take practice. And I think that's one of those things that's like you just kind of got to be a little bit looser with it as a whole and just kind of like let it be or don't do it at all. Either way.
I went a little extra with my fog, I think.
Yeah, you did good. I like that, actually. And Jenny always has to put her stars in the sky. And
that's
they're
right.
Big and bright.
Starry night.
Deep in the heart of Oregon. But yeah, you can definitely see this. Like, we definitely have different approaches to how our brushes interact with the canvas. I think that's the best way of explaining that. And that's always going to be the way it's going to be. I don't expect to paint like her. She doesn't expect to paint like me. I don't expect anybody to ever be a carbon copy of anybody else because our hands and wrists and everything work different.
Thank you, Joanna.
Yeah, I like your tree a lot, too.
So one thing that I've been doing lately that I think helps a lot is I actually give the ends, I make them like
attention.
Split ends. Because if you look at a fir tree, it actually does. It splits into like 3 or 4 little parts.
Yeah, your tree is way better
and so
than
it
mine,
does make
actually.
it look a lot more like there's just more stuff going on, a little more detailed.
So what I'll point out on this is, and this is something that I really like, is you've got a little bit more of that finer detail in the, versus mine. Mine's much more cloppier. But you still have a lot of air in between.
Yeah, it's like the one thing you want to avoid is like a bottle brush tree, and it's borderline. Like I have a habit of making it like where it's perfectly shaped, and because I fear the idea of putting a longer branch out here and a shorter one down in here, because I'm like, that wouldn't be right. That my brain doesn't like that.
Well, and like compared like this spot here on mine here, if you just left like one little gap like that in yours, it would.
The other thing too on mine, like I'm seeing it now where I can really look at it from above. I would wrap some of these branches down the side because they really do look like they just kind of cut off right there.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, and your fog's good. I feel like maybe like
A little much back there.
Well, because it's a little bit more defined, it makes this far shoreline seem a little closer.
Yeah, kind of draws the eye back right there.
So
I like this part though where
yeah, I like that a lot. So that's one of the things, like when you're talking about like doing distance and depth, when you add definition in the background, it makes it feel closer. So like if you were to take these back trees and add even just this little tree right here, if you were to put that level of detail on these trees back here, they all of a sudden feel, a quarter mile closer. So. All right, that's enough chatter about that.
Here we are.
Hey, we're back. Hey, everybody. So, yeah, that was a fun painting. I enjoyed doing that one. That was, would you say that was an 8 out of 10? Difficulty? Maybe it's a little easier.
There were certain parts of it that were definitely a challenge. It kind of felt like it just kept going for a while, and I think it's just the amount of trees and stuff.
It's just the developing the different layers.
But it's very satisfying in the end to see how it turned out.
Yeah, and I actually think that this painting is one that I really, the one that this was painted on, based on, was a much more subdued colors. And so this would be one that if you wanted to try it again on your own, do it with more subdued colors, more
like a blue-gray sky.
Yeah. Yeah. Do we have the other one right there? Yeah, it's right there.
Oh yeah.
And so this is like, here, I'll just hold this up like this. So this is what that one was kind of based on. This is a bigger canvas, and this is what I was talking about, using a bigger canvas. You can get so much more detail. And when I say detail, I don't mean like, oh, you're using a little tiny brush and you're doing a lot more detail. You're actually using a bigger brush to move bigger bits and pieces, but giving more impression of detail. But you can see this color is very soft, just little hints of blue in the sky, a little bit more some amber tones. And I think that this painting works either way.
Yeah.
And it works fine. I mean, and that, it could just be a same scene, different time of day, and that's what Monet did.
Yep, he did. Absolutely.
Did this, 6 or 7 paintings of the
as
same.
As the light changes, his paintings change.
Yeah, exactly.
Tiffany wants to know
magenta.
what she can substitute the yellow red with. Yeah, magenta, or you can use a blue-based red and add a little white to it.
Yeah, but I think magenta is going to be your closest.
Magenta will be your closest, but yeah, the if you can't find magenta, just like there's yellow-based reds, and that's going to not give you the right color, but a bluer-based red, like a true fire engine red, will give you pretty close if you add a little white.
Yeah. Bright red, like a brilliant red. Cadmium.
Cadmium's a little orangey.
A little orange. Alizarin.
Alizarin crimson you could do by adding a little white.
Yeah, but that's a scary thing.
Not
Alizarin
always.
crimson is like glitter. It's like you get a little bit on your brush and it's there forever. So
it's a potent color.
It's a very potent color. I love it. But yeah, I mean, if you're going just for the simplest colors, magenta would be definitely I would actually say we could substitute magenta for every single one that has phthalo red.
Yeah.
They're so similar. And those names like phthalo and cadmium and stuff, those are all just basically the minerals that are the pigment.
And it's shortened. It's like a really long name.
Yeah, so whereas like magenta maybe has phthalo in it. I don't know. I don't know. It's just a name. It's just like saying yellow. Well, it's not. Is it yellow ochre or is it cadmium yellow? No, it's just yellow. So
Okay, you're nerding out.
we're nerding out. That's what we're here for.
So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. Happy
Yep.
Father's Day to all the dads out there.
Happy Father's Day, everybody.
And we'll be seeing you soon. If we don't see you before July 4th, have a wonderful 4th of July. That's
safe.
well,
Be safe. Be safe. Be
yeah,
safe.
I'm going to try to do the gnome video between now and then. We should be able to. So I know a lot of people have been wanting the gnomes, and it's in my plan. So I guess that's what I'll be doing next, hopefully before July 4th.
Yep.
But if not, you guys enjoy all these wonderful celebratory days, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Love you guys.